In the captivating world of ancient Rome, marriage was nothing like the romantic ideal we imagine today. Instead of being about love or lifelong companionship, it was more of a strategic move, a way to secure alliances and boost family status. Surprisingly, it was completely normal, even expected, for Roman husbands to be unfaithful. Affairs weren't something to hide or be ashamed of. On the contrary, many men openly engaged with courtesans or maintained long-term lovers outside their marriage. But that wasn't the full picture. Roman men often had romantic and sexual relationships with other men as well, and this was considered just another aspect of everyday life. To truly grasp how ancient Romans viewed love, sex, and marriage, we need to step away from modern ideas about relationships. In their world, marriage, power, and pleasure were deeply intertwined, and personal identity wasn't defined by rigid labels. In ancient Rome, what mattered most in a relationship wasn't who was involved, but who held the power. In a typical male-female relationship, the man was expected to be dominant, the giver, while the woman was seen as the receiver. This dynamic wasn't just about intimacy. It reflected broader ideas about control and social status. When two men were involved, things became more complicated. One of them had to take on the more submissive receiver role, something the Romans associated with femininity and weakness. For adult men, being in that position could carry a social stigma. However, it was often more acceptable if the submissive partner was still a teenager. One well-known form of same-sex relationship in Roman culture was called pederasty. In this arrangement, an older man, known as the erasts, would form a bond with a younger male, typically a teenager, called the eromenos. But this wasn't purely romantic or sexual. These relationships also involved mentorship, education, and often helped the younger partner advance in society. Large age gaps in these relationships weren't considered scandalous the way they might be today, especially among the wealthy and powerful. For Rome's elite, it was viewed as a natural part of a young man's path to adulthood, offering access to mentorship, political connections, and social advancement. Among Rome's highest ranks, emperors, generals, and politicians, it was perfectly normal to have both male and female lovers. What might surprise modern audiences is that this behavior wasn't usually considered cheating, not in the way we define it now. At the time, there were no reliable methods of birth control, and childbirth posed serious risks to women. So when men had affairs outside marriage, particularly with other men, it was sometimes seen as a practical way to avoid endangering their wives, a kind of ancient workaround to prevent pregnancy. In same-sex relationships, this added a layer of complexity, but also revealed just how differently the Romans thought about intimacy, fidelity, and family duty. In Roman society, the more powerful partner, like an emperor, was generally expected to take the dominant, masculine role in relationships. It was a way to project strength and authority. But Roman norms weren't always followed, even by the men who made the rules. Surprisingly, even some of Rome's most powerful figures didn't stick to these expectations. Julius Caesar, one of the most iconic leaders in Roman history, was rumored to have preferred the more passive role in his same-sex relationships. This shocked many at the time and sparked endless gossip, as it clashed with the traditional image of a strong, commanding ruler. Emperor Hadrian also broke with convention. Although he was officially married, for political convenience, there's little evidence of any true romantic connection with his wife. Many historians believe their relationship was purely ceremonial, especially since both partners had lovers of their own. Hadrian, in particular, gave most of his attention to men. One young man stood out among them all, remarkable not only for his beauty but for his intelligence and presence. One of the most significant figures in Hadrian's life was a teenager named Antinous. Hadrian adored him, ensuring he received a top-tier education, and the two traveled together across the Roman Empire. Their deep bond, however, ended in tragedy. While they were in Egypt, Antinous mysteriously drowned in the Nile River. Devastated by the loss, Hadrian took extraordinary measures to honor him. Near the spot where Antinous died, he founded an entire city and named it after him. He had Antinous' body mummified and transported back to Rome. Hadrian even minted coins bearing Antinous' image and went so far as to deify him, declaring Antinous a god, an incredibly rare act. Worship of Antinous soon spread across the empire, with temples and statues erected in his name. But Hadrian wasn't the only Roman emperor with unconventional love stories. Emperor Nero also had relationships with men, but his actions shocked even the Romans. While most emperors chose male lovers from among their palace slaves, still treating them as subordinates, Nero took things much further. Nero didn't just have male lovers, he held full wedding ceremonies with them. In one instance, he married a former slave named Pythagoras. What shocked the public was that Nero took on the role of the bride, complete with a wedding veil, while Pythagoras acted as the groom. This reversal of roles caused confusion, as the emperor was expected to embody the dominant, masculine ideal. Later, Nero married another young male slave named Sporus. This time, perhaps to satisfy Roman expectations, Nero assumed the traditional masculine role. It was a clear example of how even an emperor had to carefully navigate the line between personal desire and public image. However, some of Nero's actions would be considered deeply disturbing by today's standards. In one infamous case, to reinforce his role as the dominant partner in the relationship with Sporus, Nero reportedly had the boy castrated, a brutal act committed purely for the sake of image and control. There are also accounts of Nero being harsh or even abusive toward his lovers, though it's difficult to know how much of this is historical fact and how much is exaggerated by hostile sources. One of the most shocking claims about Emperor Nero is the ancient allegation that he committed incest with his mother, Agrippina the Younger. This accusation appears most prominently in Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars and more cautiously in Tacitus's Annals. Both sources suggest that Agrippina may have initiated the relationship in an effort to maintain control over Nero after he rose to power. While this allegation remains one of the most infamous parts of Nero's dark legend, most modern historians agree it was likely a political smear, a vicious fabrication. Incest was considered the ultimate taboo in Roman society, making it a powerful tool for enemies seeking to destroy a ruler's reputation, especially after death. It's a clear example of how sexual slander was weaponized in Roman political life. Yet while Nero's alleged transgressions are extreme, another emperor, Tiberius, is remembered in even darker terms, particularly for how he treated the young people around him. Tiberius is often described as one of the worst abusers of imperial power when it came to his lovers. He had a known interest in much younger boys, and the way he allegedly treated them has led many historians to label him one of the most sexually corrupt emperors in Roman history. Much of this behavior took place away from the public eye. Tiberius spent his later years secluded in lavish villas, especially on the island of Capri. Some of these stories may be exaggerated. Roman historians often sensationalize their subjects to portray them in the worst possible light. Still, even if only parts are true, they offer a disturbing glimpse into how absolute power could be deeply abused in the Roman Empire.